Good afternoon. This is Micah Mitchell with Madison County Weather Updates. I wanted to do the video that I talked about last week about why I word things sometimes the way I do when there are severe threats, and sometimes why I talk about severe weather when there's National Weather Service gives us no threat. One of the things I want to go back to first, I guess, is back to this April 18th of 2013. This was a day where the National Weather Service issued what's rarely issued, and that's a PDS, or Particularly Dangerous Situation Tornado Watch, for most of Indiana, including Madison County. All the ingredients seemed to be there. There was anticipation of, you can see the line there with cold front, storms along the cold front, but what was anticipated was discrete supercell storms blowing up ahead of the cold front that could potentially produce long track tornadoes. But what happened that day was, as this cold front advanced and got near Lafayette, there was also a residual warm front that was coming right off of the point of this. And warm fronts generally will blow their storms up at night, and those storms will fade during the day. But what happened with this one was it actually began to develop storms out in a line out this way. As those storms got just past Lafayette, this cold front line kicked off an outflow boundary. Then the warm front line kicked off an outflow boundary, and between the two, they basically stabilized most of the atmosphere. And so we ended up with no tornadoes that day, but instead what happened was, where that all came together, we ended up with a major flooding situation, which the people in Elwood will remember very well. Elwood picked up 5 to 6 inches of rain in about a 2-hour span that afternoon. So the severe weather threat that day ended up being flooding, and flash flooding actually, instead of tornadoes. So this is a case where it would seem to have been a bust on the tornado front, but severe weather-wise, it did produce the flash flooding. Move ahead to this situation, which was last May 1st. You can see that up there. I posted this in the morning. The National Weather Service had put a slight risk of severe weather out for I-70 and points south. So it was basically supposed to be a southern Indiana severe threat. But I saw that there was a potential for, even though the ingredients weren't there in the morning, there was a potential for the ingredients to develop further north. So I put this red circled area out and added this box here indicating that I thought there was a threat for severe weather up here. Turned out what ended up happening that afternoon was the ingredients began to develop, and by that evening numerous tornado watches or tornado warnings actually came out. I believe there were only 2 confirmed tornadoes, but there were just numerous tornado. You can see here a graphic from our page also. There were, just numerous tornado warnings, including one for, ended up being here in Madison County for, Frankton, North Anderson, Linwood, Chesterfield, etc. So that storm did end up producing, and now I came back later, and explained what happened. So that was a case again where we were only in a marginal risk area, yet the storms produced when there seemed to be very few ingredients. Move on to this situation, which this is not zoomed right. Let me see if I can get this to do what it's supposed to. There we go. This was from last August 24th. And what happened here is, again, you can see the National Weather Service put a slight risk for storms across the southern half of the state. And we indicated that we thought there was a threat north of that. BAMWX.com and Danielle Dozier for Fox 59 were the only other ones that I recall hearing that day. I remember Danielle Dozier definitely tweeting that we could not dismiss the threat of tornadoes, and BAM did the same thing. In fact, you look down here, the National Weather Service, this was a probabilities of tornadoes, and they only gave a 2% probability of tornadoes, and it was way out in Missouri. But instead, what ended up happening again, the people in Kokomo will quite well remember that they ended up with the F3 tornado that touched down in the Markland Mall and did damage. Howard County had 5 tornadoes come through that county that day. There were 8 total. They were all up in the red circle. None of them down in the slight risk area. So I don't say this stuff to say anything negative toward the National Weather Service, just to point out that there were these days where I saw things, some other people saw things that were different than what the National Weather Service saw, and it produced in the marginal risk areas. Then we had the PDS situation that produced nothing but, produced heavy flooding, which is just as destructive. So my point in all of this is that I think that we should not always be focused on whether it's a slight risk, enhanced risk, particularly dangerous situation. What we should focus on is there a risk at all? That is what I will tend to focus on. And so you'll see me on days that I'll maybe say that I don't see what the threat, but I'll still tell you what the National Weather Service says, because maybe they see something I don't. In the same token, there may be days where the National Weather Service doesn't see anything that maybe I do, and I will alert you of that also, because I would rather you be warned that there's a risk rather than thinking that everything's fine and then being stunned by severe weather later in the day. I'll do the same thing with snow. I'll kind of address that when we get into the fall. I may do another one of these videos and talk about what I look at as far as snow also. The winter has really made us all look like fools the last 2 years. There's a reason for that, and I'll address that later on. So anyway, I just wanted to do this to give you an insight into why I say some of the things I do with severe weather. So I appreciate all of you that follow. We're almost up to 3,000 followers on the page. I'm extremely flattered by that, and spread the word. I'd also encourage you, if you depend on accurate weather for your business or what have you, get a hold of bamwx.com. Their rates are very low for their weather forecasting services. I can't recommend them more highly. And again, this is Michael Mitchell for Anderson Weather Updates. Thank you very much.